All right. Hello, everyone. I have Amanda Doherty here from Amanda Doherty Press. And today we're going to chat about marketing for therapists and creating whatever exactly digital hospitality is. We're going to find out. So make sure you comment on anything that resonates with you or questions you have, and we can try to answer those. Um, let's see. I'm going to welcome you, Amanda, and let you just tell us a little bit about you and your business. And thanks for joining.
Yeah, of course. I'm thrilled to partner with you in anything, Sheila. I'm Amanda from Amanda Doherty Press. I've been in business for about 5 years now, which feels unreal. Prior to that, I was working as a grunt for a number of other SEO agencies, and I decided to cut ties, become a slightly a rebel, like most of us entrepreneurs, and decided to go and start something completely different and noticed a number of patterns in the industry that I really didn't like. And purely out of spite, I wanted to prove that it could be done differently. And so I met Sheila here through a collaboration we did on her brand and her website. So I absolutely love the heart and the intentionality that she brings to her business. I also love how entrepreneurial she is. And I think that this is an industry that you go in and you do this enormous amount of work to become a therapist or a practice owner, group practice owner. But the actual running and managing of the business, like so many other like high skilled training, that's missing. So something I absolutely have adored about Sheila from day one is that she has that entrepreneurial mindset. And I know that she's going to have an enormous amount of value to bring to this group. And she can keep me honest as far as how my process goes and what it looks like to partner with us too. And hopefully some of the value that we can bring here will help you equip yourselves to your practice moving forward.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm already noticing a delay. So we're just going to bear with
It
tech,
happens.
tech starts right away issues, huh? What what inspired you to work with, therapists to build websites for us, right? Because we think we're special in terms of, what we offer out there. And but it takes a lot, I think, to figure out how to incorporate our values and, our specialties. We all have unique niches and be able to target our audience in a way that is competitive. So how is it that you started working with therapists?
Honestly, it started with one specific therapist, and she hired me to help her website specifically because she had invested an enormous amount of time and energy into SEO. So this is Julie Reichenberger out of Denver Metro Therapy in Denver, Colorado, and her website was phenomenal. And she was ranking for an like number one in the world for how to write an apology or something like that, which I think is just like pretty incredible that she put that much sweat equity. The issue was that those leads weren't actually converting into people who are making calls. And so that's kind of where the discrepancy I'm noticing, where if you're thinking about traditional marketing, if you're thinking about SEO and trying to make sure that you're being found online, it's a very techy, there's very little personality into it. And it's actually very gimmicky, I would say, and driving that much traffic to a website that's not going to actually land anybody, right? What's the point? It's like setting a pile of money on fire or hours of sweat equity on fire. So my primary role in working with her was to make sure that the site was really curated specifically to her target audience, that it communicated what her ride or die values were as a practice. And so she had expanded, I think it was year 10 that she found me. So we were naturally in that transition period of her business. And so some of those big questions like what's your ideal client look like? What are your core values? And how do you position yourself in a highly saturated market? Because therapy is only becoming more and more saturated, which is fantastic. It means that there's a need and there's a drive. And we've definitely leapt over a number of hurdles and faux pas that were related to therapy in the past. So I think that's a fantastic direction that we're headed, but it does make complicated the whole process of marketing and standing out in an overly saturated industry. So through that process with her, I realized, you know what? Therapists are amazing communicators. They're highly educational. They understand the role of digging deep to figure out and uncover like disuntruths. And so much of the way we operate as a business kind of comes down to our own understandings of who we are, what we bring to the table, and how we can position ourselves effectively. So, in my mind, the core values that are naturally found in the therapy circle were directly aligned with what I find valuable and in the process of web design and in brand design because it's highly collaborative. I don't need to come and tell you what your business is. I need to figure out the core DNA of your brand and be able to help make that shine. That's really a very collaborative process. I don't really want to outsource it to somebody who's just going to tell me what my brand is. I think that's a waste of money. It's kind of silly. It's going to land flat. Similarly, I think that the idea of doing some back digging and some, core internal work is going to offer an enormous amount of clarity, one for your business, but also for your clients. They're going to read that and they're going to see a much clearer picture of what it is you bring to the table and how they fit in that picture, which is largely the biggest pain point I'm noticing with therapy practices right now. I think they're very centric in communicating clearly to other therapists. I think we're missing the mark when we're trying to communicate to our clients and to our potential patients what specific value points are going to transform their lives, because they're looking at it as, I need help. Who's the right person for the job? There are a million people they could call that have a lot of letters behind their name, which is, that's half the battle right there. And you guys have done an enormous work to get there. But then what's next? Why, how is that office going to feel when I walk in? How is that initial handshake going to feel? Is this someone that's going to trust that I have a maybe non-traditional background? Is this going to be someone that values and the deep things that I advocate for on a daily basis? Is she an advocate, or is he an advocate for those things too? So I think that's the biggest pain point that we're trying to jump into. And so we're just naturally aligned in that sense. And it's been really fun to evolve the business to make sure that we're honoring therapists in allowing them to do that work. And it is a lot of internal work, as you can probably attest to as well. I remember
I
that
was
was
going to, yeah. Yeah, I
and I
mean,
love
there's so many good nuggets there, right? Like in the fact that you're talking about, I mean, you can't use traditional marketing in a way, right? And like it's important for us and for our clients that we communicate connection and authenticity and genuineness, right? Because those are the tenets of what therapy is in building relationships with our clients. And we need our websites to do that. And so you're talking about a whole different way of marketing that is aside from kind of traditional marketing. In kind of our world, we've heard it termed like soulful selling, but I think we still, as therapists, I can say the royal we, like, I don't like the word selling, but I get the concept of this idea of, it's soulful. It's coming from this deeper place, right? That it's not manipulative. It's not doing what we would think marketing um, really stands for. And I think as therapists who haven't been trained in school how to market themselves or how to be in private practice, like marketing maybe has like a weird negative connotation around it. So I think that that's a piece of it, right? And so you get to really convey, us. I think through the process working with you, it really helped me understand my business and my niche and what I was trying to communicate, because I didn't know how to do that before. And it was hard, but it was good. It put me in a really good place.
Great. And I'm thrilled to hear that. I know that we've had conversations about that, but I remember in the moment, it was like, I don't know. I don't know if I want to do this, because it does take an enormous amount of work to dig back and really evolve the trajectory that we're wanting to go.
Yeah.
But it is highly effective. And what I think you nailed 2 points there, I think that I really want to address. So if you're going into psychology or therapy, right, you have a background in psychology.
Mhm.
Sales and marketing agencies tend to have that background as well. So many of the students that you sat with in school had either a minor or a secondary degree in psychology, so that they could learn how to manipulate the human psyche to bend in the world of
Yep.
sales and in marketing, which is largely why it feels so icky, because you've been trained on how to spot those red flags and avoid them like a plague, right? And you feel really protective of your clients to make sure that you're not trying to, throw the wool over their eyes and convince them into something that's not in their best interest.
Yeah.
And so something I think is really important to keep in mind is that your motives are your own. And I can't, from the outside say, maybe you are sleazy, not you specifically should, but maybe there's a practice owner out there that's listening and thinking like, I'm going to just completely win everybody to my side, and hopefully it'll work, maybe it won't. But honestly, I have yet to meet a single therapist who's thinking so thoroughly about how to market their business, who has gone through these thousands of hours of clinical work and supervision, who has done this enormous amount of education, who would be able to come in front of somebody and say like, hey, I've done the work, here's the true value. But really the trick is to communicate that perceived value, because that's really ultimately what is going to be most important to you as you're going out and providing these services. Your services are worthwhile, they're helpful, they're aligned with a specific population. The trick is to figure out who it is specifically that you're serving and being okay with those that are not aligned with your brand and allowing them to walk away. I have clients that call all the time, and while initially in that first, I say that first year, if somebody said, no, I'm not going to work with you, that stung. Like it hurt a little bit. But at the same time, now I'm sitting here like I would much rather have someone who's fully aligned with my vision
Mhm.
say yes, because it's a process. It could take 2 to 3 to 4 months down the road, especially if, this hurricane season made a couple of complications with a few of my clients. Sheila included this last year, and she was very gracious with it. So it takes time and it takes work, but I would much rather choose 3 highly aligned, clients who have a lifetime relationship professionally with, than 20 that I'm trying to communicate. Just like anyone that'll book me today, please, because I need to fill my calendar. You're going to regret that 3 months down the road, I guarantee you. And you're going to be in the same spot having to do the
That is
same amount.
therapist. Yeah.
You're going to need that help there. So that's exactly the point. Like honoring what you're most aligned with and making sure that if you're going to serve this one population, do it to the best of your abilities and unapologetically communicate that in your marketing and in your strategy, because it will resonate with the right people. But if you shy away, nobody's going to find it and nobody's going to benefit from what you bring to the table.
Yeah. And I think there's so many similarities in what you're talking about in your own business and therapist, right? When we are first starting out in private practice, sometimes we are really wrestling with, I need clients. And so you do make sacrifices and take clients that don't really fit, or you're going, oh man, this is not my dream client that I like to work with, right? But then you can get to a point where you can start really picking the clients that fit your niche and that you feel energized working with. And so I think there's some similarities there. And I was thinking too, even like the deep dive that you had me do, I felt it was therapeutic in a way. It was like an intensive, you know, like
I've heard that.
really learning about myself. So, I mean, it was money well spent in that way too, right? I I thought I was just gonna like give you some information and you were gonna just like go in and do all this stuff for me. And I was like, what? It's not like
Sorry, I love you. No.
that. Oh, but it was good. It was good for me. So thank you for making me do the work.
Of course. No, I absolutely appreciate it. And I mean, doing the work is half the battle. And as entrepreneurs, I've actually had a couple of conversations since with Julie, and she was mentioning how, attachment theory is a conversation that we talk about all the time. Both of my kids are adopted, so attachments in our world, it's part of our lifestyle and our family. And she was just mentioning how much attachment theory, the way that we operate in relationships absolutely is going to bleed into how we operate as a business and how we perceive our relationships with our clients. And so honestly, I can't think of a single entrepreneur out there, even if you weren't a therapist yourself, even if you know all the information, there's an enormous amount of value in having a therapist help you outside of just the marketing realm. Like I do hear that often. I'm like, oh, I feel like I got therapy through marketing. And I love that that's, a trajectory, but at the same time, having a professional that can help you with some of that, stuff on the back end, that would definitely help to inform the season of entrepreneurial growth that you're going into in this next season is always a really helpful strategy too. And I think that's why a lot of people are, pursuing what you're having to offer, Sheila, with this consulting group. And I think that that's going to be a very natural growth trajectory for you, because it's going to be a very easy way for them to say, hey, I'm struggling with these 3 things. Well, why is it so hard for you to put yourself out there? What specifically are you concerned about that's going to come back and potentially prove the error? Let's talk imposter syndrome. Let's talk all these different factors that are absolutely relevant
That,
in every industry, but specifically because you're in that therapy realm, you have to have it together to be able to present that to your clients and serve them really effectively.
yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, thinking about, websites are so important. There's, certain directories out there that therapists use that have been effective that maybe we don't love. But they're not maybe in a place where they can really invest yet, right? In and have the budget to get a well designed website. What advice maybe do you have for them who are maybe hesitant to make that jump or make that investment due to budgeting concerns or whatever?
I would say that's a very relevant concern. I think every one of us in every industry, we have a shopping list of things that we're hoping to attain. And so something that I think is common in the marketing realm that might help with planning in your realm as well. we call them initiatives. So we have quarterly initiatives where at the end of this year, right, if in January of 2026, I want to launch a new website, that gives me a whole year to allocate towards, working towards that specific process. So if you're thinking, here's my goal, I'm going to establish a goal. If I don't meet it, big whoop, I'm the only person that misses out on it. But at the same time, it kind of puts you in that position where you start working towards it. And what can you start working towards? I think most, I don't know if you have any specific metrics that you've experienced as well, but I've heard a lot of companies say it's ideal to start setting aside about 20% of your operational budget towards marketing. That's a really healthy number once you get established. I know when you're getting started, it's like, hey, I've got $20 to my name, and I'm really hoping that that's going to buy me gas on the ride home from the office. So I'm not talking specifically to that, but to work towards that trajectory and make steps that are going to actually allow you to make that decision. And the reason why I say go ahead and cast vision and find somebody that you're excited to work with now is because that's going to keep you motivated in the process, because I cannot tell you the value of a website that will bring to your business. The number one thing I hear when clients call back and when I check in with them 6 months later is that it's a lot easier to land the clients and not having to sell as hard anymore, which right there, you've already invested. Like a website becomes your primary salesperson. It's on call even when, you're asleep at midnight and somebody is struggling with something and they're like, I need to book an appointment right now. Your website's working for you and she's on call all the time. And it's glorious, right? So that's fantastic. I love waking up to those bookings. But then beyond that, it's going to help serve as a virtual office for your clients. So there are some industries out there, and this is something I think is really a pain point specifically for your industry. There are a lot of industries where if I were to go to their website, there's very little I'm looking for because I know these 3 things have to be done. Like if I'm looking for a handyman to fix my fence, the quality of their website does not matter to me. Like if they can hold a hammer and they have the equipment and that they're licensed and insured, great, they're hired, right? But if we're talking about something, and if I'm talking about finding a hairstylist, right? I want to look at her Instagram. She's going to have an Instagram that has hair that looks like mine and it has to look glorious like mine. And if I walk in, her hair better look glorious because it's casting vision, right? That perceived value matters. She could have the highest training in the world, but if she comes in with this messy bun and greasy hair, she's not touching me. So that is her primary canvas of communicating her perceived value. For therapists, you guys are kind of stuck. You're stuck with either Psychology Today, which, at the bottom of each one of those options, it shows here's 10 other similar therapists that have similar credentials who might be cheaper. And for those that are looking specifically at that as their metric, that is not doing you a service at all. And largely the language that's on Psychology Today is very resume based. It's like if you're handing your resume into an employer, but it's a totally different language handing your resume to an employer than, communicating and connecting effectively with clients who are looking for you to be the solution to their problems. And so I think that because of Psychology Today, because of BetterHelp, because there's a number of different avenues that have got their acts together, your industry really has very limited options as far as how do I communicate my credentials? How do I communicate that I'm professional? How do I communicate that I'm friendly and safe to talk to? How do I communicate that I have it together and that I'm worth $150 an hour or $250 an hour? That's a reality, right? Like it's an expensive service, and at the end of the day, there's no full guarantees. And so that's an outsider speaking. It is an expensive service that's inaccessible to everybody. And I know we would love to make it that way. But just the fact that it's an expensive service with no guarantees kind of forces the burden of communicating the value that you bring onto your shoulders as the practice owner. And so the only way to do that in an effective strategy with your specific industry is through a website, because Instagram isn't quite going to cut it. And, these other avenues aren't going to advocate for you the same way that you can on a website. So I think just because you have limited options of what you can do, you definitely want to prioritize working towards that website. Not just because I'm a web designer telling you that, I'm just seeing the huge transformation process we've seen in our case studies and certain clients across the board. The ones and the clients that I work with that have the most success are the therapists by far, because it's a huge difference between going night and day of I have no website, I have a Psychology Today page, and then suddenly having a whole home where I can host and create an environment for my clients. I can show them that I'm here to provide services and free offerings and serve them before they even pick up the phone to book an appointment with me. So it's an entirely different experience, and one is going to take a lot longer than the other. And I think it gives you control of your marketing, and you're not completely reliant on word of mouth. which is great because word of mouth is fantastic, but it means that somebody else is in charge of your marketing strategy. And if
Mhm.
those, if those recommendations dwindle, then so does your practice. And that's a very scary position to be in 3 or 4 years down the road. It's not quite as sustainable as having your own home to curate.
Yeah, and within the therapy realm, the top ones are word of mouth, right? There other therapists or even clients. But even looking at, I see in Facebook groups all the time, therapists will put their Psychology Today page instead of even their website. And I'm like, what are you doing? Because even when you share it that way, right? Like you've just opened up the realm to all these other therapists. Share your website, over that page. Don't give them free business, to look further.
Mhm.
Clients are pretty overwhelmed anyway looking. And I know as if I'm looking for a therapist, I'm going to want to go further and look out there what's out there and go to their page, right? And as therapists we can add so many other things on there because I know a lot of us want to do more than just therapy, so we can
Yeah.
put products and services and things like that on our page and have that all beautifully on there to sell while we're sleeping.
Exactly, which is the game, right? That's half the battle right there. I think the other element to that is Psychology Today. If you're thinking of it not from a therapist perspective, from an outsider's perspective, if I'm looking for a therapist, I'm going to Psychology Today purely just to verify that they're not a quack, right? To
Mm-hmm.
show that like, they do have their credentials, they're verified that they absolutely are who they say they are. And beyond that, there's not much information I'm looking there that I'm really gleaning that mention. It's purely just to verify credentials. And I think most clients are thinking the same way, but they're going to want to go to that Psychology Today page and say learn more or access their website. And if there's no website or if the website is lackluster, they're
Yeah.
going to click on the person that has their website that is clean and concise and communicates effectively what they're trying to do. So
Mm-hmm.
that's definitely where I would say yes, it's an investment. I cannot overstate that, an investment is different than just like me handing money over and hoping that it lands right. Like an investment is something that grows. And if you think of the lifetime client, how many lifetime clients do you have to accrue through your website before you've paid it off and then continue to progress forward in your business? And so that's where we're having to think less from a therapeutic standpoint and more from an entrepreneur standpoint. Like, how do I make sure that I'm investing in something that will grow with me? How do I make evergreen decisions? So I know a couple of programs you mentioned, that you and I have had collaborations about. I think there's some value in having like those cohorts in like a writing community. Like let's get together and share all of our website copy and share. We'll each invest in a different therapy centric template. The issue that I find there is that we're finding ourselves in an echo chamber where we're having therapists, offer a lot of information and insight from other therapists exclusively, rather than thinking back and stepping back and thinking, who is my ideal client? How are they going to feel about this copy? How are they going to address these specific pain points? Is this information that they're sharing, is it too clinical to the point where I don't feel like I can connect? Or is it oversharing to the point where I feel like they're going to have as emotion, a lot of emotional baggage as I am in that session. And I'm not sure that's the best fit either. So I think it's helpful to have cohorts in conversations like this in the entrepreneurial sense and in helping with further education, but don't isolate yourself in everything that's completely niched to therapy, because it's value to get some insights from other industries and see how other industries are thriving and how they're working and how you can apply that same game strategy to your own business.
Yeah. Yeah. And some of it's out of panic, right? Oh my gosh, this worked for them and I need this. And then we all look like cookie cutter with the same stuff, which does not feel authentic to me. I don't personally like that. And I shy away from websites that look like that. But then there's websites that either have not enough information or we are way too wordy, right? We feel like we need to put everything on the page. So
Yeah.
something you kind of alluded to just in conversation without saying the words was digital hospitality. And you've thrown that word around a little bit with me. What does that mean? And in the context of a website for a therapist?
Right. And so when we're thinking about therapy practices, right, we want to be authentic, we want to serve, we want to be wholehearted. I like the soulful selling. I think that's a really resonant way to say it. The issue with marketing in general is that it feels very detached. And so it becomes overwhelming. There's a lot of shiny objects in marketing. There's heat maps, there's all kinds of nerdy things that I could talk through that I honestly, at the end of the day, don't think play to a therapist's strengths. And that's largely why so many people shy away from it. They think this feels gross. And if it feels gross, it's not going to grow with you because it doesn't feel like it's in alignment, and you're not going to nurture something that feels out of alignment with you and your practice. So let's just ditch the old strategy and let's come up with something new. And I think that the new tradition that we're kind of focusing on as as our agency specifically, is how do we extend the natural strengths of therapists to be able to effectively market in a way that feels right for them, because then they're going to continue to pursue it. They'll feel ownership of it, and it takes away, it kind of demystifies most of the pain points of marketing. So instead of thinking of a website as a sales tool, right, you're thinking of it instead as an office that's virtual, especially for those of you that only offer virtual services. If you don't have a physical office, the amount of intentionality you should put into your virtual office needs to be either equivalent to or more than you would if you had a brick and mortar office to welcome people into. Like we're working on building out a studio right now, and the amount of conversations of what books should be on the bookshelf when they walk in the door, it's exceeded, like, it's neurotic. It's like, I think we reached a point where like I'm overthinking every detail in a physical sense because I
Mhm.
want it to feel a certain way. I want clients to know exactly where they can hang up their coat and put their purse and know that it's in a safe location. I want them to know the natural trajectory of where to find the bathroom. I want them to know that I invested in plush toilet paper instead of single ply because I'm not trying to be cheap, right? It goes down to that degree of detail where, there's fresh flowers in the, at the front window, and, there's magazines that were from this year placed on the coffee table. Those details matter, and it proves that you're hospitable. It shows that you have their best interest in mind, and you're going to do everything you can, because there are so many, intangibles when it comes to therapy services. These are the tangible things that people are going to look at and identify as valuable to them, that they felt cared for and nurtured, and that they're in an environment where they can feel safe, where they can release some of their control and their stress. And so that hospitality needs to be communicated online. How do you have fresh flowers on your website? You have up-to-date information on your website. You make sure that, the copyright at the very bottom footer is 2025 instead of 2024, which is obviously something we're working through with most of our clients right now. And that's just part of the course. You have blogs that are written that are relevant to what they're currently talking about. It means a lot when clients go and say, if they come to my website and if they only see, 2023, what marketing looks like in this next year, that's out of date. It completely undermines, my understanding of saying like, hey, she's relevant, she's authentic, and she knows what she's doing. That blog being the top blog in my, article that I published does not verify that in any case or anything like that. You want to have professional photos, and I cannot say that enough as well, because so many of my clients have like the selfie that they wouldn't even put on their Facebook profile, right? And yet it's like the primary picture that they're putting in front of
It costs
everyone.
$150 or more.
Yeah, I know.
She
Like I
does.
have, yes, it's one of those investments that I am hoping. I can't change my hair for the next 3 years because of how expensive my branding photography was 2 years ago. So we got to keep them looking relevant because it's expensive, but it's an investment that pays off. And so those are the things where if you shift it from a light of sales and, where do we put this button to be the most manipulative so it forces them to click it? Let's just think from a, outside perspective. How do I arrange my office to make it clear that they know where the bathroom is?
Yeah.
How would I arrange my table to make sure that they feel like there's something like not between us when I'm sitting in an office and having a conversation with them? How do I speak with them in a way that is personal, that is, you know, viewer or, reader focused? How do I make sure that they, if there's a glass of sparkling water when they walk in, or there's a coffee machine, something that's showing like, I want to serve you, I want to offer you some value, and I want you to feel like I have it together enough so that you can go and do whatever internal work is necessary to get you into the next stage of your life. And that right there is what they're looking for, because there are a lot of people with an enormous amount of credentials that are fantastic, but at the end of the day, if they don't feel like they can connect with you, so rather than thinking of overly clinical language or thinking of, overly oversharing, like, hey girlfriend, tell me about your day, like that's a little bit too far. Like, how do we establish that you are the professional, that you can help guide them in doing the internal work that they need to do? And how do you reassure them of that in a way that's going to be resonant, not just in the office, but in the digital space as well?
Yeah. So them going through their website and making sure even that stuff is up to date is really important. You just dated my hair. in my photos. Luckily, I'm going tomorrow to get my hair done. So, but I'm
It's gonna
thinking
look
I need to checklist some things too for mine of like, ooh, does it say 2025? Because I've already been playing around and doing some things on my site. So I've got a checklist developing from this
there you
conversation.
go. Yeah, and even having a color like if you think of a therapy office, if you close your eyes and picture what a therapy office has looked like for the last 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
right? Same exact thing with the website. I can close my eyes, I can picture exactly there's a lotus flower or a dandelion, or the stack of rocks, like the cairns of
Oh
rocks.
yeah.
Is that
Somebody
periwinkle
looking off over the mountains.
the little paperweight heart shape in the hands. There's a lot of giveaways that tell us that you have not addressed the design aesthetic of your website in many, many years. And if that's not your gifting, it doesn't have to be. Just make sure that there's some, I would err on the side of, at the very least, I would find what platform do you want to grow into? Let's find some evergreen decisions and making sure that you're not having to rebuild every step of the way. If you feel like you want to work with my agency in 2026, great. Start setting aside some money, start decide, book a call to discuss what that payment's going to look like so you know exactly what to plan for, and
Yeah.
then figure out what platform you want to have your website on so that you can start getting used to that platform now as in the meantime work on getting your content up and running so that you have that functioning piece there, and that way you feel comfortable and confident in the platform once you do have that fully fleshed out website. So I think in whoever you decide to work with, try to make these evergreen decisions, planning about a year in advance to allow you to grow into the vision that you have for
Yeah.
the next year, because it does take time. It does take that work, and it certainly takes an enormous investment of both sweat equity and financial investment. But I think just the sense of it's a lot easier to say, yes, I want to invest in that because it's going to serve my clients. It's going to make them feel at home online and establish a culture of service and of value and a perceived value before they even walk in the door. And
Yeah.
that to me is an enormous gift that you can't get otherwise. You can't shortcut your way through social media strategy to get that. You need that dedicated space that's uniquely your own, that you can invest in your clients as much and as often as you can, realistically in your timeline.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I just think about, I loved that there was payment plans. And for me, it was worth it because if we can't invest in our own business, why would we expect clients to, right? Like we can't make fearful decisions. Fearful decisions never get us anywhere good. And it is investing, right? It's investing in us. It's investing in our school, that all of our experience that we have. So to me, it was a worthy decision that needed to happen. I really love the platform because I spent so many hours building my website myself. I think it was really hard for me initially to make that transition over and to let go of that. But everybody I talked to, because I talked to three of you, right? To try to make an informed decision of who I was going to go with, everybody was pushing a different one than what I was using. And I was like, oh my gosh, no, I did so much work over here. But it is such an easy platform. And can I just say, I love that I can look at the computer side, like, right, and like see the mobile side right there too, and like how it's going to lay out, and it's so easy and beautiful, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
It's fantastic. I really love that you have full control over that, because otherwise you're just kind of hoping that the builder will do you justice on the mobile side, and that's
Yeah.
about as much control as
And
you
I've seen
get.
that go awry and go badly with people that have gone with really cheap versions of marketing. Here, do my website, and then they produce this like, what
Right.
is that? I don't know. It's you can see it when someone does not put the money into it. And,
Exactly. And I think your clients can see it as well. So especially if you're in a highly affluent area. Like I have clients who are in Santa Monica, California. I've got them in Boulder, Colorado. I have a couple in Spain, really affluent areas. The areas that they're shopping in, the brands that they're interacting with, you have to be on par with
Mhm.
the brands that they're interacting with. And that just kind of is, it's not me saying that's going to be the case just like an outside party. It's like if I am used to shopping at these really high end, really, hands-on boutiques
Mhm.
that, feel exclusive and feel like dreamy, that is going to be the expectation I bring to everyone I bring, including my therapist. And so I want that environment to feel right. And like someone that comes off the street from like a really high-end bougie,
Mhm.
beachfront neighborhood is not going to want to walk into a dark alley to find like terrible parking to walk up 3 levels, to like this over garage apartment studio that we call a therapist's office. It's not going to translate well. And the exact same case is to be said virtually as well. So if it says built by GoDaddy at the bottom, that's a dead giveaway that it hasn't had the nurturing as it needs to. If it feels like the original WordPress blog that
Mhm.
came out in, like if it feels like a MySpace era WordPress blog, then
Oh,
that's
that was
probably
my
an
page.
too far. It happens. We're all been there. We've all been there. I remember honestly, and I love WordPress for many things. And I think that's, that could be a whole different conversation. Which platform makes the most sense for me? I
Mhm.
would say, without a doubt, the platform that's going to do the most justice is the one that you feel most equipped to work on. And I
Mhm.
do remember that conversation where you're like, I don't want to switch to show it. And I think I had to hold the line. I was like, well, here's the data. And
Yeah.
that way, at least if you make that decision, you feel like you've made the decision based on what we're actually seeing versus these preconceived notions. Because again, if you're talking to other therapists, you're going to hear them say, I love Squarespace because. If you
Mhm.
talk to someone that works with SEO, you're going to hear them say, I hate Squarespace because.
Mhm.
And if you talk about WordPress, like there are a lot of shiny objects and there are a lot of plugins that you can install into your website that could absolutely become a landmine 6 months from now if you don't know how to operate those. So I always say WordPress is great if you have an on-site developer that can help you with those issues. But if you're booking a website with a web designer who's going to build it on Divi or with Elementor, right there, you've sabotaged the time speed or like the loading speed of your website. So you've essentially stunted any future SEO growth you have for your website because
Mhm.
speed is a factor that goes into that conversation. So again, I would say while there's a lot of factors as far as ease of use and comfortability, it's really important to make sure you're actually talking to specialists who could speak into those things and have case studies to present and some data that makes each of those decisions more informed than just, I specialize in this because I like it. That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Definitely make sure you're making decisions based on a specialist inside too.
That's so important. I'm glad you brought that up. And just about the speed, because I didn't even think about that, right? When we first talked and how quickly something loads. Earlier too, you're just talking about the presentation, right? And kind of again back to that digital hospitality and like the way we're presenting. And I think that speaks to money too, right? Like when therapists have a lower rate and we have our own just discovery that we need to have around that. And that's another conversation too. But when you offer the lowest rate, if you're wanting high-end clients too, they're not going to necessarily want to come to you because they're not going to think that you're worth even the $90 or whatever, right? Like, why are you so low? So even thinking about like how much you're charging, I think is really important too when you're looking at who are the clients that you're working with and that you're trying to market to. So just to throw that out. So
Absolutely.
if you're building, if someone's building their own website and they're waiting that year, right? They're not at a place to invest. What are other tips that they could maybe do to create an attractive website?
Yeah, and I think it's a fantastic question. There are a lot of beautiful templates that can get you started. And so, what my team has developed, even since the time that you and I worked together, we are kind of offering like a sliding scale of services that kind of provide less hands-on time for us to make sure you leave with something that will hold you over in the meantime. So, I do think that there are a number of designers that have those intermediate options there. So, depending on how far back we're starting, we're talking like I don't have a website at all. I don't have a single dollar to invest towards that. I'm going to do this completely on my own. My biggest recommendation for you would be to actually go to Google and type in the specific keyword you're wanting to rank for. So just go to Google and type in like therapy in Santa Monica, for example, and look at the top 10 results. What do those websites look like? What platform do you think those websites are built on? How many pictures, what kind of images are being presented there? What conversation pieces are they presenting, which I think is really important. So not just like, here are her credentials, but like what kind of services are they? Are they highlighting the services themselves, like EMDR specialist? Or are they highlighting the pain points that those EMDR specialists are going to help to correct, right? So in your area, it's going to be determined by your location. And so a lot of people are typing in, if I know what EMDR is and I'm searching specifically for that, great, that's going to be rewarded. If it's an area where that's not a common treatment plan quite yet, where that's a new and upcoming service for that community, then instead typing in like trauma treatment, anxiety treatment, depression treatment, things that are going to be resolved by. So you're having to kind of decide and make plans based on what's already winning. You're looking at your
Mhm.
competitors. I think that's the number one question that I get a lot of feedback on when we first get started with a new client is who are your competitors? Because we're going to do a competitive
When you're,
analysis.
Mhm.
Yeah, it happens. And the question is like, oh, I didn't know I have competitors. Or the other side of that coin, because I also work with nonprofits and they don't like the language of competitive. Like that automatically, that's
We're
just
all
not in their brain.
friends, we're all friends.
It's like we're all besties. It's not so much like if we think of it again from that hospitality piece, what are your, the current winners in the industry doing that
Mhm.
are subconsciously training your clients who are finding their results first, right? That's the whole definition. If they're on the front page of Google, they're doing something that is being rewarded by
Mhm.
because their clients are finding their information most relevant. So you have to use that and kind of do a little backwards math and some deconstruction of like if they're talking a lot about trauma, why don't I use a similar model and address trauma on my website? If they're talking specifically to one specific region, or if they have, a section at the bottom that has multiple service areas, right? It kind of gives you an idea of what you're going up against. It'd be like if I'm a swimmer, so if I jumped into lap lane and just started swimming, I had visors on and had to like swim without actually knowing where my competitors were at any given time. How do I pace myself? Where, like it's hard to imagine actually winning anything and achieving anything or understanding what my pay, it feels overwhelming. So I think an enormous amount of clarity comes when you actually just see what is the competition doing,
Yeah.
what are my clients becoming familiar with, what are they expecting to find on my website? Because if it's not there, again, it's something to work towards. Let's blow up this whole year and say like, hey, if we're launching next year, like Q1, let's just take a look at the competitive landscape. What's going on? How many other therapists are there? Is there a natural gap in the industry that I can fill? Quarter two, let's talk about messaging, right? And so that's where you have, again, Google's a fantastic tool. I don't know if you've ever typed anything in, like a question, and then you scroll down and it has related questions, and then it has those drop down options for other or similar search results. When you click on any one of those right there are going to tell you what the most common searches are from your ideal clients.
Mhm.
So that's the content I would start writing right now because it's really hard to start a blog and get excited about publishing a lot of information. But rather than talking just to therapy groups, it's helpful to see what are your clients typing in the search results? What information specifically are they looking for? How can you make sure that you are addressing and have that information on your website so when it does come time to place that on your website effectively, or step into that, that whole rebrand situation that we're talking about a couple years down the road, let's make sure that information's there. So using your client's information and using Google to inform the content you're going to place on your website and knowing what your competitors are already writing about and is setting those expectations for your clients. Those are that's an incredible, like, I mean, my biggest tool, you asked me, I think there was a question that's like, what are your favorite tools? This sheet of paper is my favorite tool. I think that we have too many shiny things. And so having just a notepad on hand all the time and just being aware of the competitive landscape so you can make sure that people know exactly what are you offering that others aren't offering? What are your competitors doing? What colors are they using? Are they going a very modern direction? And you want to go a more like holistic feeling, like cozy, site. You want to figure out how you can position yourself differently because your marketing budget, if you don't have a website, is not as high as the one that has a stellar website yet. So you don't want to go toe to toe with them. You have to figure out what's your unique niche and how can you carve out a little space that's going to be different and stand out in an overly saturated community. So I could talk all day on that one. To me, that's
Yeah.
very exciting through that but I think at the end of the day, it's the idea that you have to understand what your clients are looking for. And the easiest way to do that is to start internet sleuthing and just, pull out the old MySpace stalking days and apply that to your competitors and figure out what they're doing and see what's being rewarded and find that strategy and apply it to your own brand in a way that's completely unique to you. And that right there is going to set you light years ahead of the people that just invest in here's a $20 template on Squarespace. Let me just plug in the answers. You've already done the work and you have a really solid core idea of who you are and where the trajectory of your business is going to go.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I think as therapists, we're really good at knowing our clients and who they are, right? And like, I feel like I can figure them out pretty quickly. But when it comes to really getting into who is my client, where do they shop? What do they, I'm like, God, all of a sudden I'm like, I don't know. but I do because at least for me, my client is me. Right. And I think
Mhm.
a lot of us as therapists, sometimes our clients are also some of our ideal clients are also them, right? Or like things that because that's what they know and that's who they like working with. And maybe that's like egotism on our level too, on some level. But I think that helps too to be able to kind of put that on of like to step back and be the client, right? And do that search. But it's about doing some research from a couple of different places as the client, but then also, yeah, who are our competitors and what does that look like? And how can I pull some of those elements in and also make it look fresh? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Those are
And
good.
err on the side of simplicity. If everything else fails, just err on the side of simplicity. Don't get too bogged down, and that will give you room to grow.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. Any other advice you would give therapists just building their businesses or even, um, ways to address some common mistakes that they
Mm,
make?
love that question. I think there's two directions that go. I think one we kind of addressed already in the sense of make sure you're speaking in a language that's resonant and connecting with your client, not becoming overly burdening them with your emotional baggage as well, which is definitely, I think, the trajectory I'm seeing a lot of therapy niche web designers going. And I think that's a mistake. So I think if you find it helpful to pursue connection over oversharing, make them the focus, not you. I think that's an incredible direction to go. And that's what's probably the easiest thing to shift in your copy. The other factor I would say is to put on your entrepreneurial hat and start to get in conversations about marketing that go well beyond a therapy practice because the game is the same for every industry. And it's a matter of gleaning information. You could be looking at like a contractor's page and glean something that would be valuable and helpful to your therapy practice.
Okay.
One thing I think most industries struggle with is this concept of backwards math, right? What do I price my services? What will people pay for my services? That right there is an indication that to me that's an early practitioner because otherwise what we're thinking is here's how much I need to make this year.
Mm-hmm.
This is how many hours per week I need to work this year. This is what price point, these are the realities of my expenses of my studio that I'm having my office. These are the website fees, and you're allocating money aside to determine what you have to
Yeah.
charge or
Yeah.
what you should charge. So it's not a matter of saying, what would someone that's looking for relationship help pay? The conversation is, I have to charge this much per client. That's the reality of my situation as an entrepreneur. How do I amplify the value of my services to the degree where I am actually providing that much to my client? That
Yes.
right there, a completely different perspective that we are completely missing in most every industry. This is universal to every young entrepreneur. But I think specifically for therapists, we have this tendency to think, well, I don't want to charge that much because it feels like I'm cutting out a population that needs my help.
Mm-hmm.
There is absolutely another potential helper that can help with that. If you're not aligned with them, that's great. You're in a group right now with almost 200 people already. And that tells me right there are people that are wanting to serve really effectively and really help, people. And so if you're not the right fit for them, that's okay. You have to release that. It's not your responsibility to fix everyone. There's a lot of bleeding hearts in this industry. So we want to make sure that you're not digging yourself into an unsustainable hole, that you're charging what you have to make sure that you're able to continue to sustainably grow. If you can't afford basic marketing practices, to me, that's an indication that one, we don't have enough clients
Mm-hmm.
to sustain the marketing practices that you have, or you aren't charging enough. And if you're not charging enough, you have to really think, how do I elevate the value of my practice and of an hour with me to the point where it is absolutely easy for the right client to walk in the door and say, hey, I'm happy to exchange this number. Like getting my hair done, it's like a $400 haircut.
Mm-hmm.
I have curly hair, so I'm needy. And my colorist, I value that a lot. And so that's something I will exchange $450 for on semi-annual basis. Makes me cry every time, but I'm gonna do it because I know the
Will be me
value.
too.
Like the value to me is worth it. And they have established like the salon, it's like a glamour room. I leave like feeling like I had a weekend at the spa
Oh my
and
gosh. Yeah.
providing it, right?
Yeah.
So they're stepping up to that challenge and they're charging what, they need to be able to offer at that high-end service. So stop cutting prices just to make it more accessible to your clients, because I can guarantee you, and this is another factor for your industry as well, is that there are some realities, like if you think about serving clients who are struggling with divorce,
Mhm.
That's a very financially expensive thing for them to
Mhm.
have to undergo. So therapy services for divorce on top of everything else they're doing right there can be a challenge. So it might also be that you have to reassess what specialties you're offering, because can that population afford the services in the current reality that they're experiencing? And that's not to say they don't deserve it, but that's to say, like, if you're wanting to offer EMDR, you
Mhm.
know, a foster parent isn't going to be able to afford EMDR for their kids who are experiencing trauma, but there are other options and there are other avenues that work with government grants who are more equipped to handle that kind of client as well. So I think it's helpful to know in network in a way that your industry is specifically geared to do. You guys are highly collaborative and you network and you talk a lot. I
Mhm.
think having a network of referrals that you could, still serve and say, hey, I think this is an entirely valuable thing. You definitely deserve the best in therapy. I'd like to introduce you to, Sally over here who specializes in these things. She's in a price point that I think is going to honor your budget. And I cannot wait to hear that you're progressing forward in your mental health journey.
Yeah.
That to me is a much greater option in serving those clients than it is to try to continuously chase the lowest fee client in the market, because that's not going to serve you. You're going to be working overtime just to barely pay the bills. And that's going to make your therapy services lackluster. So make sure you're protecting the value that you bring to your clients and just pursue alignment over everything else when it comes to your price points, and make sure you measure up. So if you're going to charge $250 per hour, please invest more than $150 in a website, because
Mhm.
it's not going to align. Those perceived values don't match.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think a great place to end. And it's interesting too, and I'm glad you brought that up. And I try to really hit that home in this group and to talk a lot more about that too, of like, what is your life, and you need to think about like how much time off you want, how to build that into, what you're pay, what you're charging, and how many hours a week you're working, and all of these things, right? Like figure it backwards, not just pick a number out of the sky, what you think your clients can afford. But there's so much more that goes into that, and I cannot hit that home enough. So I'm glad you mentioned that. I do want to honor your time, so we'll wrap up. But I want to thank you, and I will put in the chat all your information so people can reach out to you, and people are interested. Maybe we can have more discussions, because I think there's so much to learn about marketing. There's so much we don't know. And so comment below if there's other thoughts or things you'd like to hear more about. I appreciate anyone that stayed around this long. I think the wind is really taking a toll on my audio and my video. So but we hung in there. So I thank you all, and yeah, enjoy that. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. I did. And thank you again, Amanda. I appreciate you.
Of course. Thanks so much.
Yeah.